All right. Seeing people come in here. It's 10 o'clock on the dot. So I'm going to give it just a second to let people get in. It's so funny. Since virtual meetings started happening, I used to, in person meetings, get there 5 minutes early or so. But for virtual meetings, I log in right when it's time. And then it can sometimes take a couple of minutes to get in. Okay, looks like we've got a good group in. So I'm going to get kind of started on our intros so we get Melissa the biggest chunk of this hour we can. Thank you for joining us today. You have reached the Lighting Design Labs webinar series. Today we are doing Powering Your Building, the role of electrification in optimizing building operations with Melissa Sokolowski. And I just asked you how to pronounce that, and I think I did okay.
You did great. Yes, good job.
Thank you. I'm Katie at the Lighting Design Lab, City Light employee. And let's get started. Where's my mouse? I'm calling in from a different location today, Portland. I'm at a conference, so uh, bear with me if I've lost my mouse. Different setup today. We're going to start the day with a Slido poll. It's very easy. There's no tricky questions. The trickiest part is getting to Slido. So take out if you've got a phone, you can scan that QR code right on your screen, or you can open up a tab, go to slido.com. The annoying thing about slido.com is you have to enter the Slido number, which is 1348697 on that main page, and then it asks you for another code. And that today is HLZB8M. I'm going to go to the next page. If you don't get all that, it's also on the next page, and I'll put it in the chat in just a second. Because I want to get these out of the way. If you haven't taken a webinar with the Lighting Design Lab before, we have everybody on mute the whole time, but you are still allowed to ask questions. If you find the little questions mark in your toolbar, click on that, a menu or a window will pop up. Send your questions anytime. I'm going to be monitoring them. I'll interrupt Melissa as needed. Longer questions we'll save to the end maybe. And there is a chat function too. It's disabled except for I can send messages out. So that's where you'll find when I copy and paste a link or something like that. You can't send anything through the chat. This webinar is being recorded and I will have it posted within about a week. I don't have last week's posted yet. It's been a busy week and we had Monday off at the city. So give me just a little bit of grace on that. I'm asking you guys for a lot of grace today. And then there's a survey that will pop up in your, oh, thank you for posting that, Robert. Robert just put the Slido code and passcode in the chat. There's a survey that will pop up after on your browser after I close the webinar. Please take that. We appreciate it. Because this is a pretty short webinar, I'm going to kind of skip this slide. I don't see a whole lot of, well, there's several actually new people. This will be in the slide deck when we post it. You can read more later. But I do want to talk about some of our upcoming events. On October 29th, we're going to talk with Todd Amundsen. God, his name is so hard for me to say. About M&V with BPA. There's an in-person opportunity because it is a 4-hour deal, but it is limited to 30 people and we're about half full. And then on November 7th, back to virtual, we're going to talk about those cool new, sometimes they're called micro heat pumps. They're kind of like a replacement to a window AC, but it's a heat pump, and so it can heat and cool. And we have one of the manufacturers is going to be on, and Robert, who's in the background right now, is going to tell us some more about it too. And then a couple of events, a controls and commissioning for trade allies event that is sponsored by all the area utilities. And then specific to Seattle City Light, there's a trade ally meet and greet. Go ahead and reach out to us if you want more information. They're also linked on the Lighting Design Lab website. And to get to the Slido poll, if you have not logged in, the passcode and Slido code are listed on this slide as well. And very easy question, where do you do most of your work? Not where you're working at or where your building is located, but where is most of it? So it looks like Seattle, still Washington, no outside of Washington people yet. Usually we get one or two, but good. Local. All right, thank you for doing that. And there's just one more question. It's a little bit of a thinker, not a thinker, but you have to do a little bit of thought. What are you hoping to learn today about building electrification or optimizing your buildings, or you're just here to see what Melissa has to say? I'm going to give you a couple seconds to type that in because that takes a little bit longer than just clicking a button. And then we will hand it over to Melissa. More. More is good. You want to learn more. Lifelong learner. um, and then as these are coming in, I just want to let you know in that Slido app, there's an option for questions. I'm not going to be monitoring that, so don't put any of your questions in Slido. Put Oh my gosh, you guys, you want to learn more options and all of it. Thank you very much, Melissa. I hope that helps you. um, and I am going to hand it over to Melissa now, and I will turn my video and mic off, but I'll be in the background. Let's see.
Okay.
Make Melissa a presenter. Here we go. Thank you,
Well,
everyone, for coming. And sorry, Melissa. And thank you, Melissa, for your presentation.
yeah, no problem. While this is coming up, I'll just comment that I am not going to be able to cover all of it. This is a very broad subject, but we will look at some best practices. We may even include more and, um, you know, what was the other request? It was
And
all of
options.
it, more, and options. Yes, we will also talk about some options. So there we go. Okay. Can you confirm you're seeing my screen?
I cannot see it yet.
Okay. Oh gosh. Okay. Got a little error. Experiencing difficulties. Let me try again.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
We just practiced this
We
and it worked
just
great.
practiced this.
Come on. Anybody have a fresh joke you want to share in the questions pane while I'm bringing this up?
Oh yeah, I usually have a goofy, silly goose poll question. I wasn't feeling that today. Uh, oh, I see it. It came on as soon as we started talking
Okay.
about something else. Okay, here we
Okay,
go.
good. All right. So save your jokes for later, people. We're going to get right into it. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity. Again, my name is Melissa Sokolowski. I'm a senior project manager with the Smart Building Center, a project of building potential. And my background is in facility management in commercial buildings, energy management, as well as on the ground building operations. Um, I am going to just share with you a little bit about our organization and our programs. Building Potential is, you may know us as the Northwest Energy Efficiency Council, or NEEC. We just this last year went through a name change to reflect our expanded mission toward eliminating carbon emissions from building energy use through market-based thought leadership, education, and advocacy. So sometimes I may slip and say NEEC when I actually mean building potential. But NEEC has been around for about 30 years almost. And Now building potential, some of our programs, we operate the Smart Building Center, which is a brick and mortar location in Seattle on Beacon Hill in the historic Pacific Tower. We have well, I'll get to that in a moment. Some of our other programs, our flagship program that was started almost 30 years ago as well, the Building Operator Certification. We have a remote learning library accessed on the Smart Buildings Center website, a YouTube training series, and our Clean Buildings Performance Standard Help Desk, as well as a tool lending library. I'll just go through each one of those a little more detail. I won't spend too much time on that, but Smart Buildings Center is a nonprofit education program. We do events, trainings, and demonstrations, and we also offer training and meeting space for folks in the industry to use for free. Um, the building operator certification is, again, one of our flagship programs. It's a nationwide professional credentialing program for building operators and all of those who work in building operations, facility managers, engineers, maintenance folks, etc. I do want to just note that the building operator certification level 2 is one of the options for a qualified person for compliance with the Clean Building Performance Standard. I know that standard is high on a lot of folks' minds and trying to meet compliance, so this training can help get you there. I also am a very proud BOC grad from way back in the day. It really helped to jumpstart my career in building operations and facility management. On that note, with the Clean Building Performance Standard, we have a help desk. It's free. You actually get to talk to a person, my colleague Rebecca Shepard. So she will offer one-on-one consultations, a lot of resources, training videos, etc., to help you with your compliance for clean buildings. And our tool lending library. I'd be interested to maybe well, you can't raise your hands because we're on a listen-only webinar, but I imagine some folks out there in the audience have used our tool lending library. It's a pretty wonderful thing. Um, we have over 85 different types of diagnostic and monitoring tools available to borrow for free. You can pick them up locally or we can ship them to you. So this is one of the few things in life that sounds too good to be true, but is actually true. There's no catch, and we have a lot of different types of tools for all of your monitoring and diagnostic needs. We also have a tool library resources page with a lot of tutorial videos, etc. So just wanted to make mention of those offerings from the Smart Building Center, and let's get right into it. Any questions so far? I'll just pause for a
None
moment.
so far, but I do want to point out Len Canapel, you win the gold medal. He found where the little React icons were, and so he didn't raise his hand, but he thumbs up that tool lending library.
Good. Yeah, Len, thank you. Thanks for the kudos. Yeah, appreciate it. All right. So our agenda for today, we'll do a quick definition of electrification and decarbonization. Those terms get a little interchanged. We'll talk about the goals, the whys of how electrification is being implemented, as well as the benefits. We'll provide an overview of some of the technology that is key in this transformation, and we'll talk about some of the barriers that building owners experience as they take on electrification projects, as well as some strategies which can help overcome those barriers. We'll also take a look at some case studies. And so what is decarbonization? Reduction or elimination of CO2 emissions, to put it pretty simply. And as I mentioned, decarbonization and electrification are very closely related, sometimes used interchangeably. decarbonization specifically is the reduction of or elimination of CO2 emissions. So for the building sector, that means reducing the CO2 emissions in the building's energy use. Then electrification is a means to achieving decarbonization. So it's a strategy of switching from end use fossil fuels like natural gas, propane, or oil to technologies that use electricity. It's also sometimes referred to as fuel switching. And while today's presentation focuses on electrification in existing buildings, there's also some overlap between this and other sectors, especially electrical generation and transportation. So we'll touch on those things as well. And just a look at the carbon emissions in existing buildings. You can see here that this is broken down by the four most common fuels. This is from the latest version of the CBUX, the Commercial Buildings Energy Consumption Survey from the United States Energy Information Administration. You can see that the natural gas and fuel, as well as district heat, which can be from renewable sources, but is often uses fossil fuels and boiler systems, for example, that the over 2/3 of each of those fuel sources is for space heating. And then we look at natural gas, specifically the next couple of sources. Space heating is in dark red. Then we have the light blue is water heating and the pink is cooking. So those are the primary uses that we see for natural gas. And so I just want to make a point that electrifying these uses is key to decarbonizing buildings. And this isn't just easy, right? There are a lot of considerations because switching fuels has a number of implications, equipment, operational changes, investments in efficiency, which is still a key aspect of electrification, and new skills, new trade expertise. For example, heating with a heat pump requires refrigerant expertise rather than a boiler system, for example. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. All right, the why. I think probably I'm maybe preaching to the choir, or at least we all know why we're doing this, but I'll just give a brief synopsis. Buildings account for almost 40% of the planet's heat trapping, greenhouse gas emissions. This graph here shows the change in global surface temperature, which is increasing at an unprecedented rate. These heat trapping gases are driving global warming and in turn driving climate change. Along with it, increasingly extreme weather effects. We're seeing that play out real time. And of course, other effects like diminishing glaciers, rising ocean levels, all just becoming more and more prevalent. And of course, the science is clear that temperatures will continue to rise. And some of these changes may already be irreversible, likely they are. However, if we can reduce emissions now, we may be able to avoid some of the most damaging effects in the future. And not only environmental issues are driving this, but there are huge health impacts as well. And I was taken aback when I came across some research from Harvard and University College London that found that fossil fuel-based air pollution was responsible for about 1 in 5 deaths worldwide in 2018. 1 in 5 can be um, linked to fossil fuel based air pollution. That's staggering. So we got to do something, right? Um, Thankfully, as the urgency to act has increased, we are seeing some historic investment and um, and goals. The U.S. rejoined the Paris Agreement in 2021, which commits the nation to transforming our electric grid to 100% renewable energy by 2035 and a net zero emissions economy by 2050, which means we're balancing the amount of greenhouse gases emitted with those removed. And then this graph here shows the historic investments that have been made recently to address the climate crisis. So you can see the three largest, most distinct pieces of legislation that were recently passed here on the last column, and you can see how it really just dwarfs any previous investment that has been made federally. So these all together, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. That one specifically is considered by some to be the most significant climate change legislation ever passed in the United States. So that's good news, and that money is trickling down to states and regions who are also implementing decarbonization and energy efficiency efforts. So this map shows states that have set greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. This is as of 2023, totaling about 25 states. And so just for a couple of examples, California has enacted several decarbonization initiatives. Washington State, of course, the Clean Buildings Performance Standard, which was enacted in 2019, which requires commercial buildings to meet specific um, energy use intensity or EUI targets. New York City adopted Local Law 97, which establishes a carbon cap on buildings, and which has really helped to accelerate the discussion and research and development of colder climate electrification technologies. So we're seeing a lot of change coming, and we're seeing in many jurisdictions requirements to actually reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And I would be remiss to not mention Seattle's recently enacted Building Emissions Performance Standard, or BEPS. So it's coming. If it's not here for you yet, it's coming all over the nation. We're doing this. We're making this happen. We have to. So how does that affect us? Well, we're seeing again some of these policy trends. So, for example, in Washington State, the Clean Energy Transformation Act goals are shown here. 2045, 100% clean. So that's a pretty lofty goal. And the Climate Commitment Act, as well as the Clean Buildings Performance Standards, but I mentioned recently, are the way that we are going to meet these targets. I won't dwell too long on this slide. It's a little old, but I think it's important to illustrate. As of 2015, you can see what really jumps out at me. For one, buildings are the second largest of source of greenhouse gas emissions in Washington. And for two, you can see how significantly the emissions from buildings has jumped, 51%. So that's a substantial number as our population has grown and our emissions just keep rising. And I do also want to just mention that the Washington State Energy Strategy recommends electrification as the least cost pathway to decarbonizing the building sector. So that's what we're doing, and that affects everyone who owns buildings or works in buildings and cares for the buildings that we live and work and play in. Okay, so I'll just pause for a moment. We've talked about the what, we've talked about the why, we'll get into the how, but I just want to make sure there aren't any questions. So far, I am
Yep,
talking a lot. I'm going to take a sip of water.
take your sip. There aren't any questions yet, but let me use this second to remind people to look for the little question icon in your menu bar. That's how you can get your questions written in to Melissa. Don't ask them in the Slido because I'm not looking there right now. But ask your question anytime you think of it. You don't have to save it till the end. Put it in the questions and we'll get it answered.
Yes, please. I feel like I'm talking. I get tired of hearing myself talk, so I'm glad for you to jump in. All right. Well, for now, let's continue. Talk about some of the how. So, so Rocky Mountain Institute estimates that for the building sector to contribute proportionally to the energy transition, we need to have a 50% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030. That's coming up real quick, and zero carbon by 2050. Um, it's estimated that about 80% of the buildings that will exist in 2030 are already existing today. I've heard that even the buildings that it's close to that for even the buildings that are will exist in 2050 are already existing today, a very large portion. So existing buildings are key to addressing this decarbonization initiative. We can certainly build better buildings and electrify as we build, but we've got to address the existing buildings. So to meet all of these lofty targets, we because the building sector, of course, globally produces about almost 40% of carbon emissions. Um, Buildings need to be taking a multifaceted approach. Um, Not only do we need to electrify equipment, we need to also be investing in electrical generation, in incorporating renewables into electrical generation, 50% renewables in electrical generation by 2030, and our annual energy efficiency investments need to grow by a factor of 4 by 2040. So again, this is these are big numbers. But buildings have a big part to play and a lot of potential to be able to assist and contribute to this energy transformation. Um, so this is just kind of breaking down a quote from Seth Cohn from Rocky Mountain Institute. Essentially, because electrifying buildings will increase the demand on the grid dramatically, that means our energy infrastructure has to adjust and change. It already is, it's on its way. Um, but with, and we'll talk about it in a moment, with more renewable energy coming on the grid, that changes the way energy is sourced and changes the load profile. So with up to 50% renewable energy globally, we're going to need our buildings to be even more energy efficient. They're also going to have to be grid interactive and flexible. Uh, Buildings will need to utilize on-site generation, energy storage, both thermal and electric, and they need to be intelligent and include predictive controls that can shift and shed and modulate building loads in relation to what the grid needs. So in this way, buildings of the future, which are the buildings that already exist, will not just be endpoints on the grid that consume energy as they are now, but as they will be assets on the grid that provide load flexibility, um, services, grid services that are needed to support the energy transition. So what is the utility? What are the utilities doing? Um, of course, with this focus on electrification, electrical capacity is available to, electricity capacity on the grid also needs to grow dramatically. Um, and according to the state energy strategy put out by the Department of Commerce in 2021, the peak load on the grid will nearly double by 2050. Wow. So utilities are working to find ways to meet these increased capacity needs. Of course, it's expensive to build new power generation plants. Um, and so that's where a lot of different strategies can come into play to help reduce that peak load, including energy efficiency initiatives. Um, and and then the other aspect of this is that with, I mentioned before, more intermittent sources from renewables, um, they are replacing the non-intermittent sources that the grid has long relied on, such as coal or oil, natural gas, most prominently, that provide an uninterrupted supply of energy. So this shift, of course, to an increased mix of intermittent sources, um, we're looking at potentially some regions, the peak loads will actually shift from summer to winter as heating increasingly becomes electrified. Many places, peak loads are in the summer from air conditioning, but we will likely see that shifting. So again, back to incentivizing energy efficiency, implementing demand response programs. We're already seeing that start to roll out. I know Seattle City Light starting to roll out time of use, and that's kind of the precursor. Um, and also leveraging distributed energy resources, which are renewable resources that are close to the end use. So, such as a solar array at a building, for example. And then also part of that is building new infrastructure, part of that utility response. So just, I think this slide is kind of interesting. I apologize, the image isn't super clear, but um, this just looks at load profiles. First, we start out with a typical commercial building. And so you can see how if we just implement energy efficient practices and measures, we see that the load curve lowers somewhat, flattens out a tiny bit, which is good. Then we see that adding solar offsets significant loads that often coincide with utility peak loads. But this can also cause a steep ramping of loads, as you can see in this profile, and utility issues that arise because of that. And then you can see on the far right, this shows a grid interactive building with solar, um, and that also has integrated load flexibility. And you can see how that optimizes the consumption and the demand charges. So saving money on the demand charges, also saving energy, and at the same time supporting the grid stability and resilience. So you can also expect to see more opportunities for revenue opportunities when implementing demand response during within your building during grid peak scenarios. And just another quick uh, look at a grid integrated building. You can see here there's integration within the building itself with connected lighting, HVAC, possibly all using the same occupancy sensors. But then you can also see that this building is operated by a building automation system with various inputs and two-way data flow from the utility to the building and back so that that building can provide that load flexibility, those load flexibility services. So we're seeing this definitely in new buildings, but we're also seeing um, implementations in existing buildings, and I'll show an interesting case study here in a little bit that demonstrates that. Okay, so let's talk about some of the benefits of electrification. I'll just pause one moment, make sure there are no questions so far.
We have a quiet crew today.
Okay, okay. Oh,
I'm going to say it again just in case we've had some people join late. Find the question mark icon in your menu bar. Click on that. Send your questions to Melissa. Also, there's a separate chat box. You can't type in that. I've been sending out some links to complement what Melissa's saying as far as a City Light program. So check that
great,
out
thank
too.
you.
Ask questions anytime. All right.
Thank you. Yeah, and comments are welcome also, sharing your experience. I will also just take it as a compliment that nobody's chiming in because the information is so rich and valuable, and you're just learning a ton
Absolutely.
and soaking it up.
Yes.
So, okay. All right. So let's talk about some of the benefits of electrification. Of course, we already kind of touched on these. Mitigating the most severe effects of climate change, um, improved air quality and health, energy cost savings, job creation is one that I haven't talked about yet. But that is definitely, we're seeing, especially with all of the federal investment, new programs being created, investment in renewables, investment in um, education and training for workforce development. That's a whole another subject that I could talk forever about, but I won't get into here. Huge incoming, I will just say there's a huge incoming workforce gap within the building operations industry, which actually provides a big opportunity for job creation, diversifying the workforce. Um, and also improved comfort and productivity. So of course, heat pumps, you get the benefit of cooling and heating, uh, which at a more efficient manner. Um, so with thoughtful design and foresight and planning, electrification can provide all of these benefits. And additionally, um, we can also think about with the planning and foresight that comes with these electrification benefits, you also have the opportunity to really future-proof your building, being able to set up for demand flexibility, grid interactivity, and then also not being in a situation in 20 years where the fossil fuels you're using have become a lot more expensive or obsolete. Um, who knows? Or so so that's another consideration as well. Lots of benefits, and of course, a lot of challenges. to this, and I'll get into those in a moment. First, I'd like to talk about, just give a brief overview of electrification technology. Of course, what first comes to mind is heat pumps. This is key technology for electrification. Of course, very extremely energy efficient because they move heat rather than create heat. And so if you think about an electric resistance heater, it actually has what's called a coefficient of performance of about 1, which is 100% efficient. That sounds pretty good, right? All of the energy used is used to, it creates heat, which is the point of that technology. However, with heat pumps, we can actually get a coefficient of performance up around 2.5 to anywhere to about 5, which is obviously much more efficient. And this again is because we're um, moving heat from one place to the other rather than creating heat. That coefficient of performance is a calculation from the heat delivered divided by the electrical energy supplied. I know that always sounds kind of magical that we could get a COP of more than 1, but it is actually true. And again, I mentioned another benefit is that heat pumps have the ability to uh, operate in reverse, so to switch between heating and cooling. And the first costs sometimes are higher, but they often have a very favorable payback because of the energy savings over time. And I think that's one aspect of all of this that I do want to highlight is that really we want to be taking the long view here. That's where the real benefits start to be very tangible is when we take a little bit longer view. Again, first cost sometimes higher, but a very favorable payback. And I know that that can be tricky, right? Because you got to pay for stuff up front, and we don't always have the money to pay for stuff up front. So we have to settle for something more affordable. But I will also talk a little bit about some funding mechanisms for some of these strategies. Okay, and then the other aspect to this we've already seen within the past 5 years. As demand increases, the tech develops, economies of scale lower the costs. So that will continue. We're seeing that happen dramatically. That will continue to happen. Now, just briefly, heat pumps can be classified uh, by different their sources, their distribution, their configuration. Source, of course, air, water, or ground. Want to point out that those can serve loads that are either air or water. Distribution can be ducted or ductless. Configuration can be a packaged or split system. I think we're probably everyone that is on the call is fairly familiar with heat pumps, but please do chime in if you want me to say more about that. I'll move on to the next technology I wanted to talk about, which is related. Variable refrigerant flow or variable refrigerant volume, sometimes referred to as VRV or VRF. Also very efficient. This system distributes via refrigerant piping instead of ductwork. And the benefits of these are that one single outdoor unit can serve multiple zones with different heating and cooling loads. It can operate in a wide range of outdoor temperatures, including very hot and very cold climates. They offer better part load efficiencies compared to air heat pumps. They can also integrate heat recovery. They can perform domestic hot water heating. Um, and these also can be implemented in retrofit applications, for example, to replace existing boilers and chillers, um, depending on, of course, on the building and the setup and logistics there. So Couple of downsides to these, they can be really difficult to submeter when you're trying to determine energy use from individual tenants. But they are really good to also smaller VRF systems in like commercial or residential applications can serve an isolated load where a central system can't. I'm curious if anyone has experience with VRF or VRV in their buildings. You can see if you can find that thumbs up or raise hand if you want. All
That,
right.
that's up in the toolbar. It's under something called React. If you want to, oh, there was a thumbs up.
If you want to
Stephanie.
react. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Can you see them, Melissa? The little
Yeah,
thumbs up notifications. Good.
I, I keep switching back and forth, but yes, yeah. Great. Thanks for interacting, folks. Appreciate it. All right, domestic hot water heating, of course, heat pump water heaters. These are have been used for in Europe and Asia for a long time. They're becoming more increasingly widespread in the United States, and the they're getting lower and lower cost due to economies of scale. These incorporate the heat pump itself, as well as some hot water storage, temperature maintenance system, and these are really especially cost effective in buildings with large hot water loads. So think multifamily, hospitality, um, buildings with commercial kitchens. These can be air, water, or ground sourced. And just to note, air sourced heat pump water heaters, the coefficient of performance drops at when you get to lower outdoor temperatures. Um, and the types of refrigerants really matter in these systems. CO2 as a refrigerant is better in very low temperatures, but we also want to pay attention to the types of refrigerants that we're using. CO2 is, of course, a very low global warming potential, and global warming potential systems are becoming increasingly available for various across the spectrum of temperature conditions. Um, and again, the technology is just really advancing quickly, and we're seeing a lot more of these being implemented in various applications. Some of these systems are also being integrated with heat recovery, with wastewater. That's a pretty innovative situation that's becoming more common, especially in new construction. It requires wastewater storage, but it can dramatically reduce the electrical load needed up to about 50%. So that's a pretty good benefit. I will also note that these are very low maintenance. They have a pretty long life. Um, and they can be used to shift loads to off-peak because they have that ability to store heat in the form of hot water. So, and I'll talk a little bit about that. There's a case study I mentioned here in Seattle that is doing just that. So again, high COP, anywhere from about 2.5 to 4.5. Traditional boiler efficiencies are about 0.8 to 0.95 for the most efficient condensing boilers, which actually aren't always running in the condensing range, so typically average lower than that. Okay, domestic hot water heating. And then I mentioned energy and heat recovery, so pairing with heat pump systems to increase the efficiency dramatically. This works really well where you have simultaneous heating and cooling loads. For example, water-cooled chillers can recover heat that would normally be rejected by cooling towers, and so then that heat is transferred to needed loads, significantly reducing those energy costs. So, and that's what this diagram shows is a version that uses a heat exchanger to recover that heat. We also have energy recovery ventilators, or ERVs, heat recovery ventilators. These essentially, again, recover the heat, but from air before it is exhausted out of the building. So, as we're kind of squeezing tighter and tighter to find efficiency opportunities, that's where we're getting into energy and heat recovery as the next step to achieve that extra savings. And of course, energy storage, super important. We are going to just breeze through these a little bit. Thermal energy storage, electrical energy storage, and EVs coming online as distributed energy resources. That's a whole another webinar topic in and of itself. So here we are. Let's get into some of the barriers. Of course, technical and logistical barriers, infrastructure limitations, hardware, software integration, existing building structure. You have piping, you have cabling, size limitation, weight, how much can your roof support for equipment, for water storage, for example. Your electrical service capacity, very important to consider. Maintenance support, new skills required for building operators. And then, of course, those financial barriers, the upfront costs, installation, downtime, installing this equipment, training, hiring for additional trade skills. So how do we overcome some of these barriers? So, of course, I've mentioned efficiency, super important to implement efficiency measures before you implement electrification strategies. Reducing your load in the first place. Don't just replace like for like on equipment. Don't just look at your nameplate and say, this is how much capacity I need. Likely you can reduce your load quite a bit from efficiency measures, and then really right sizing equipment at that point is key to reduce the overall cost. Thorough planning, being very, very careful with your planning, and again, taking the long-term view, looking at life of equipment, tying these efforts into end-of-life retrofit opportunities. You have to replace equipment anyway. Take the long-term view, pencil it out, look at overall life cycle costs, and often it will pencil out. So again, I also mentioned renewables, energy storage, and having a plan, a clearly defined plan for maintenance, whether that's outsourced or in-house. Funding, of course, is a big hiccup. So I'm not going to get into all of these right now. I will send out the slide deck so you'll have access to read. I have some notes here, kind of explains each of these things. There are some pretty creative funding mechanisms coming that are useful for electrification related projects or energy efficiency projects in conjunction with electrification, including all that money I was talking about coming down federally into getting dumped into state and regional programs, utility incentives. Be friends with your utilities. Always ask. Often utilities are willing to do custom grants, and those can be really valuable. And then recently Washington made it possible to do the PACE for commercial buildings, property assessed clean energy. We've got energy as a service. We've got energy service performance contracting. We've got power purchase agreements. And then, of course, the traditional funding mechanisms and financing and coming back out of your capital budget. So retrofit planning. Um, Again, this is an opportunity to accomplish energy efficiency, um, update your electrical infrastructure. This is important consideration. Make sure you have that infrastructure in place. You have the transformer you need to supply the increased capacity. Um, and again, introducing and integrating technologies for control technologies for load reduction as a good strategy. I mentioned those logistical considerations, cost considerations, refrigerant types. Also keeping in mind your rate structures for your utility and what they have in store in the future. I already mentioned that Seattle City Light is moving toward time of use. Other utilities are piloting in the state are piloting those as well, and we've already got those in place. They have been in place for some time in California, for example. Um, Load demand reduction, right sizing and replacement equipment. I already mentioned that. So here's an interesting option. Somebody asked for options. So identifying some replacement options, for example, a conventional rooftop unit in a small building. There are heat pump rooftop units available, integrating that with energy or heat recovery, or VRF can be an option, a replacement option. With medium buildings, VAV, with reheat, heat pump, air handler units, air source heat pumps, multi-pipe with heat recovery, those can be replacement options. And then with large buildings, this gets a little trickier when we get into steam and replacing steam with heat pumps. But hot water boilers certainly can, and chillers, as I mentioned, can be replaced with electrification technologies. Again, reducing the load, weatherization, radiator design, redesign, and then getting those heat pumps in there, as well as energy recovery. I know we're getting short on time, so I'm going to just breeze through these refrigerants, but just wanted to make the point that um, the type of refrigerant we use makes a big difference too. Refrigerant leaks happen, they're very common, and that also contributes to global warming. So we're starting to see more and more natural refrigerants on the market that have a low GWP. This is compared to CO2, which has a GWP of 1. And you can see that some of the traditional refrigerants have very high GOP compared to that. I already mentioned distributed energy resources. I'm just going to pause for a moment. I've got some O&M considerations, and just want to make sure we don't have any questions. I know we're getting very short on time.
Yep, we have 4 questions.
Okay,
And
all right, I'll pause.
before we ask those, I know that we're just scheduled to 11 and Melissa does need to leave pretty quickly. But we'll record this whole thing, even though it's going to go a little after 11, if any of you need to drop off to go to another meeting. So
Yeah,
let me ask a couple of these questions.
great.
Jordan is interested in learning about best practices to help property owners to electrify
Uh-huh,
and says it's always going to be primarily a question of cost savings and wants to know what organizations are out there helping guide property owners. Um,
uh-huh,
Real quick, I'm going to plug Seattle City Light.
uh-huh,
Um, like Melissa said, start with energy reduction. That's usually the least cost. Plus, down the road, it'll save you money
uh-huh.
on system sizing. So, real quick, let me plug Seattle City Light, and that's what the Lighting Design Lab actually is sort of expanding to do to be kind of that concierge service. But let me ask Melissa if she's got other recommendations, such as her own organization.
Yeah, we have a lot of resources. Smart Building Center offers, as I mentioned, a lot of services. Um, be friends with your utility. I can't emphasize that enough. There are a lot of resources available. And local mechanical service companies. We have several in this region. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to play favorites, but um, they can all help with with figuring out the best strategy. And again, yes, it comes down to cost and taking that long-term view. If you can make the case, there are a lot of, as I mentioned, creative funding opportunities, service providers who are willing to foot the bill because they will guarantee that savings. They're so sure that you're going to see that energy savings. So those are some options. What
Great.
else?
And then Sarah was wondering for large tower facilities, what's the recommended strategy for decarbonizing existing fossil fuel-based heating systems?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I mentioned, the technology just is improving dramatically, and we're getting bigger and bigger systems that can really find some good efficiencies. It comes down to a little bit what type of systems already you already have in the building. Is it a large hot water boiler system? Is it a steam boiler system? Um, Chillers, etc. I did come across a case study recently. I don't have it included in this slide deck, but maybe I can follow up with a link to it. High rise in Denver, doing some really interesting electrification work. So it's happening. And again, it really every building is different, and so that's where you want to consult um, with your resources available to you, mechanical service companies who can offer those options. And always get multiple bids, of course.
And then Paul was wondering for on-site battery storage, when might it make sense for a commercial or industrial property owner to contemplate on-site battery storage?
Yeah, that's a really good one. And of course, anytime you're implementing renewables, you want to consider also pairing that with an on-site battery system that provides resiliency. Um, for when the power goes out completely or when there are surge events. And also from a generation standpoint, uh, yeah, just being able to store that energy for when you actually need it. I think anytime you have that kind of need, it's helpful to have that storage online in lieu of a fossil fuel based generator, for example. So critical services buildings like hospitals, for example, could consider having implementing energy storage as well.
And then the last was more of a comment. Jordan was didn't see DOAS mentioned in your presentation,
Yeah,
but
that's a
that is
big,
another, yeah,
big hole.
opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, dedicated outside air, DOAS, which is decouples the ventilation system from the heating and cooling system, which can provide for not only increased indoor air quality but higher efficiencies because you're not conditioning your ventilation air when you don't need to. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
and
good one. I'll have to add to this deck. Thanks for that suggestion.
and another plug for Lighting Design Lab. I know it's hard sometimes to go back and rewatch a 2 hour or 1 hour long thing on your own time, but we had a presentation on DOAS earlier this year, and then at the end of last year on that C-Pacer commercial funding through King County, if anybody's interested to go back and look at those just for more information. And that's all the questions we have right now. Do you want to finish up your slides?
Yeah, sure. I've got
Cool.
just a few more minutes. Thanks to everyone who's hanging on. I apologize for the going a little longer than I was allotted. But just wanted to look at some O&M considerations. Preventive maintenance key. We often get into running our buildings to kind of catastrophe maintenance where we're not reacting unless something is really wrong. So I can't say enough about preventive maintenance. The difference in energy consumption between well-maintained equipment and neglected equipment can range between 10 to 25%. So, so keeping in mind, making sure you have a solid preventive maintenance plan, and that your staff are trained for any technology that you're putting in. If you're putting in refrigeration-based equipment, at least have a general understanding of the refrigeration cycle and troubleshooting. Have, as I mentioned, clear support for whether it's outsourced or in-house, but if it's outsourced, have very clear contracts with those companies. Um, Also communicating with building occupants and tenants about changes to equipment and controls. The controls may be different. The way equipment operates may feel or sound different. So it's funny because I've heard that in buildings that have electrified and put in heat pumps, they often run more quietly than traditional equipment. So occupants may have a perception that the system isn't working because they can't hear the equipment. So that's an interesting one. So prepping your tenants, your occupants for changes in what you're doing is key. IT security, of course. Now this is again is a whole nother topic for a whole webinar, maybe a whole day worth of training. But and because we're buildings are all moving much more toward automation. Um, uh, Staff operators need to have some programming ability or at least some knowledge to be able to speak the language and interface with their IT departments. So I'm gonna I'm gonna kind of skip over these last few maintenance slides. Again, I will send out the slide deck, and it has some notes with some of your considerations with heat pump maintenance, VRF, and a lot of it comes down to make sure you're changing the filters. That's a big one. The stuff's not going to work if your filters are clogged. That's pretty common with a lot of equipment. Domestic hot water maintenance, control systems. So making sure that your controls are optimized. How many times have we changed or overridden our HVAC controls for, say, we have an evening event and that never gets changed back. So, and we never know because we're never in the building in the evening or rarely. Holiday schedules. A tenant moves out and the use is different or the occupancy schedule is different. So uh, maintaining your controls is important, and then especially when you're adding new equipment to make sure that you are um, applying that as is accurate. And then solar PV, the biggest thing is to clean those panels and inspect connections, etc. Battery storage, of course, PPE, safety first. Make sure you're qualified to provide maintenance on the system or contract with a professional. But mainly just visually inspecting, cleaning, looking for any bulging or leaking on your batteries, physical damage, loose cable connections, etc. Also ambient temperatures with your battery systems. Okay, I'll just finish up with a couple of case studies. This one, the Washington State Department of Services for the Blind. This is a fairly small building. They first completed the efficiency measures in the envelope, lighting, controls upgrade, and then they also did some electrification retrofits for both HVAC and hot water. Here's some of the details on those retrofits. But the most interesting part is the cost savings. So they're looking at a 70% energy savings annually, reducing their energy use, their EUI, which also could save money if, depending on if your building is looking at fines from the performance standard, for example, if you're not meeting your EUI target, and then a huge emissions reduction. And so then looking at the life cycle cost analysis here, you can see what I think is they're comparing here if they had just replaced like for like equipment. And this was, they were had to replace equipment anyway, which is why it made sense to do the retrofit. And you can see with the renewal and electrification that essentially at the total cost of ownership, it's saving quite a bit of money. So we're looking at nearly 4 million um, versus 5 million, over 5 million for replacing with like for like equipment. And that's just the efficiency over time as well as other benefits. One other case study, this was in Chicago, multifamily, and they found that the utility costs were expected to be reduced by 21%. This is a pretty new project, so they don't have a lot of real data on it yet, but it is expected to not cost the the owner costs of energy are reduced, the tenant costs are reduced quite a bit, and of course the tenant satisfaction has gone way up. They're very happy with their new heat pumps, as well as their new kitchen appliances. And then this is the one I just wanted to touch on, which is here in Seattle, the Bayview Tower, a low-income public housing property which serves seniors and people with disabilities. So this was retrofitted. This was not necessarily electrification because it replaced an electric resistance water heating system, but it's a good illustration of the heat pump water heating system. It's the first United States installation of this specific system, which is a large capacity CO2 refrigerant based domestic hot water heating system. And it is also the first installation of a load shift capable commercial heat pump water heater system nationwide. So this is exciting. In the first 18 months of operation, it operated at a COP of 2.3 and has shifted with 100% success, shifting those loads, a really valuable utility asset. This case study can be found, I believe, at Seattle City Light, but I can also provide that link as well when I send out the slides. I'll add the link to so you can read more about this. But it's a pretty cool project, and for a great serving low income residents. A really significant milestone in the market transformation. So monitoring so far has really delivered some valuable insights, and this will include continue help inform improving this type of system, and as well as future large scale implementation of load shifting hot water um, heat pump water heater systems. All right, I'm going to stop there. I appreciate you all for sticking with me, running overtime, and I will I'll provide those slides so you can send those out to everyone.
Excellent. Thank you, Melissa. It was really great. I wish we should have probably switched days when you were not backed up against another
So I
speaking
could go a little
engagement.
longer.
I know, right? I think a lot of people could. So we might have to ask you back.
Okay.
I mean, you're always welcome. We love the Smart Building Center, and actually, just real quick, let me plug their mailing list. I just got yesterday the Smart Building Center newsletter, and it advertised a Better Bricks webinar, which might interest many of you, coming up, called Profitable Decarbonization: How to Increase ROI and Strategically Finance Building Upgrades. I'm going to sign up for that right now. Um, Again, thank you, Melissa. Go run to your other meeting, and we
Thank you.
will talk to everybody later. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity. I just realized my old email address is up there, but it still gets to
Oh
me.
no.
So,
Oh, good.
so
Okay. Oh yeah, it's
there you
Neek.
go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I still call it Neek too. It's
Yeah, it's
hard
everywhere.
habit. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for joining, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you.